Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us here on the broadcast. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Nyawade is the Acting Director, Space Regulation and Exploration and Utilization. Thank you for your time. Charles Mwangi is the Acting Director, Space Sector and Technology Development. Thanks for your time, Charles. Captain Claire Muhungu is GIS Officer, and Patan Odhiambo is Space Engineer who developed Taifa 1.
All right, and indeed we are just talking about that Taifa 1, just to understand why this is such a historic moment for the country. And before we went to the break, in case you're just joining us, we are just about to look into the opportunities that it presents. And I'd like to come back to you, Captain Claire, on this in terms of the data collection that we said earlier is going to inform a lot when it comes to agriculture, food security, resource management and the likes. How has the situation been before, and what problem is this launch seeking to fix? Is it going to save us money? Is it going to save us time? What exactly are we trying to look at here?
We have been using space data to solve our socioeconomic problems, but we have been relying with other people's data sets. That's the US and other people with the private sector. But now with our own data, with our own other observation and with our own data, we don't have to rely to them anymore. We can back up that information and use it in future. For the data we have been using, especially the open source, the government from US can stop sharing the data, or the Europe, they can stop like giving out the data set for free. You see, if they stop doing that, for the country will be at loss. But when we have our data sets, we can continue doing more research and also doing more monitoring of our natural resources. That's the benefit of having EO, Earth observation satellite out there.
So it's making us sort of self-reliant, independent when it comes to getting satellite data.
Sure. As we said earlier, like data, it's a new resource. And with data, we can move. You can have a lot of even generate income. When you're developing these products, yes. You can generate income and create employment. So,
okay, yeah. All right. Charles, before you go to Patan on another important issue, looking at the space race, there are opportunities, of course, that come with, despite the concerns that have been expressed. And we'll talk about the deployment of what, for example, India, the Chinese and the Russians have done in using anti-satellite missile tests by destroying older, that is, space satellites. But in terms of the asteroids, there are 800,000 within the solar system. That is what we have. And they contain gold, iron, for example, and platinum. And, for example, one that is contained is this 16 Psyche, which is about 700 quintillion worth of valuable materials. Talking about space mining, how valuable is this, and what perspective should the global community ought to adopt instead of looking at the militaristic side of it, the development, the power struggle between the world superpowers, and rather focus on humanity and its development and taking advantage of what's in it for us in space?
Yes, space has quite a lot of potential, and I think we're still scratching the surface. And when you look at the developed countries, there has been a huge drive towards commercialization of space. And of course, one of the concepts has been, because we say space is for the common good, then who does the resources belong to? And in fact, that is also one of the conversation also, because there has been also a move towards going back to the moon and going to Mars and establishing habitations there. And of course, the private sector is also very keen in terms of what minerals can we mine from there, and who would own that? And it's not something that has been decided yet in terms of the regulation, because again, when you say it's common good, how common is it to some of the countries like ourselves that have not developed the capability to go to space? And that is why we also want to get into these conversations and stimulate the conversation within our ecosystem to say, if it gets to the point where we start commercializing, or there is a common understanding that anyone who has the capability to going out space and mine has that, we want to stand in the queue and the line to be also the beneficiaries of that. And that is where, when I started earlier, I mentioned about the importance of even having a spaceport, because that also guarantees our access to space. Of course, besides, of course, there is the element where you're able to now develop your own space vehicles to take you to the to outer space. But you see a lot of potential in terms of the capabilities and the opportunities that are presented out there by outer space. And one of the things, like you mentioned correctly, is we would also want to explore how we can mine, if that is a possibility for us, or whether we could be part of a consortium that is able to maximize on the resources that are available there that potentially do not have any impact on the ground. So we see a lot of opportunities on that.
So, Colonel, what places us as Kenya in that trajectory to tap into those opportunities? If you look at our journey in space exploration, what milestones do you see? What have we done right so far?
Okay, I think so far, I believe in the human capital that we have currently. If you remember, in Kenya, way back in 1964, as we got our independence, we also had the establishment of the space station in Malindi. So over time, we have Kenyans employed at the facility working in space, but then the aspect that this translates to our capability in undertaking space operations. Secondly, on the development of Taifa 1 satellite, this has basically been a journey to build our national space capability in systems engineering and operations. So in the past, we've been mainly focusing on the utilization of data. We've mainly been consumers. But right now, we want to be the producers of those systems. And then even for the data, processing the raw images from the satellite to having them at a usable level is something that has been lacking in the country. So you realize that over time, we already are the consuming, can I call it, segment of the spectrum. But right now, we are moving upwards towards the production and manufacturing of these systems. So we are primed for actually greater things in the future. Yes.
Do we have the receiving infrastructure, the receiving center ready and established? Because yes, we want to tap into this opportunity, but do we have it ready, Claire?
Yes, we are coming up with a ground station in Kasarani. So we are hoping in July we'll be ready to receive our first data sets and we'll start the processing. Yeah, we do have.
So that's despite the lack of infrastructure launch, we can still have a center to decode the message from space.
Yeah, we can launch it elsewhere, but we can
decode the message here.
The data ourselves and be able to utilize it within our borders.
Yes, with our ground station.
Okay. Patan, talk to me about the distance here after the launch, because I'm looking at the highest height that, or distance that, for example, Boeing 747 can travel, which is one of the most powerful planes ever developed. In terms of kilometers, the outer space, its outlook, and generally the survival mechanism there because of the oxygen levels. So what happens from Earth up to the final destination?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot to unpack just to try and help our citizens to understand what goes into this. And if you could allow me, maybe I'll explain this as a mission.
Okay, go ahead.
We look at this as a mission.
Correct.
It is not just the satellite itself. And then we break down the mission into what we call mission segments. So of the mission segments, we have the space segment. The space segment basically is the satellite bus and the payload within that satellite bus. So the satellite bus is just these subsystems that sustain the payload while it is in operation in space. Then we have the launch segment. The launch segment is the vehicle that takes the space segment into orbit. Then we have got the ground segment. The ground segment is where this is what we use to contact the satellite. So we contact the satellite so as to control it. We contact it so as to get its own health status information. We contact it so as to get the images that we receive. And maybe just to clarify again the question that you've asked, the launch segment, we are not implementing it in Kenya currently. Like Charles mentioned, we don't have this infrastructure at the moment. The space segment is what we are taking to space, so that one we have already fully implemented. And then the ground segment is what we are currently setting up so as to be able to do the three things I've mentioned with the satellite once it is in orbit. Then to the next question, we do have types of satellites or mission categories. We have mission categories based on the orbit altitude, let me say. So we have the ones that are highest from the Earth, as I could say, and they go around the Earth. These ones are the geostationary satellites. They go around the Earth along the equatorial plane. They go around the Earth once every day. And then we have those which, these ones occur at around 36,000 kilometers. Then we have those which are lower than maybe around 35,700 kilometers. These ones we call them medium Earth orbit. They go all the way down up to around 3,000 kilometers above the Earth. So the ones that are in geostationary mostly are used for communication, maybe predicting weather and such purposes. Then the ones in the medium Earth orbit are used maybe also for communication, some for scientific research, some for Earth observation, and so on. Then we have the low Earth orbit satellites, which now will be found between 3,000 kilometers and maybe up to 300 kilometers or 400 kilometers. These ones are mainly used for Earth observation. Nowadays we have some that are used for internet communication, such as Starlink. We have others that are used for what we call navigation. So we have satellite categories based on orbits. We also have satellite categories based on orbit inclination. That is the angle at which the orbit is lying with regards to the equator of the Earth. So for example, the question that was asked earlier, why US and not somewhere else? If you wanted to launch a satellite that goes around the equator perfectly, you would need much more fuel if you launched it from a higher latitude such as the US. Maybe if you launched it from California, you would need a lot of resources for it to be able to end up on an equatorial orbit. But if you wanted to launch a satellite such as Taifa 1, which is going to be inclined at a very high angle, you need to be at a high latitude, such as the United States. So California is one of the unique places where these kind of satellites are launched. So basically it is a collaboration. Do you have the position? Then let me use your position to launch my satellite, because it is more effective that way. Then we also have a satellite.
Okay, before you go to that point,
yes,
talking about the latitude aspect and the need for that, then is it a possibility ever that it will be launched from here at one point?
Yes, from mission to mission, one of the things we decide on is the orbit. So if we wanted to do, for example, communication satellites, or if we just wanted higher revisit times without regarding to the consistency of illumination of our images, we could consider an equatorial orbit, and in that case we could do Earth observation missions that are launched from Kenya. But if we wanted to do maybe communication satellites, very well we can do them from Kenya, because the most obvious orbit that we will need for them is a geostationary orbit, and that geostationary orbit is equatorial.
And there's another question before you proceed, and this is very basic from the common man's perspective. Someone asks, and in Swahili, this is very basic from layman's perspective. Hii kitu ikilonchiwa, number one, nitaiona aje? Two, na itasimama wapi?
He's actually asking it how it came.
And that's how this question is coming. So just an understanding, because this is a taxpayer who wants to watch this. How is it going to be practicable? And then once it's launched, itasimama wapi, as they're asking. So just an understanding.
Okay, so ninajibu kwa Kiswahili ama?
Yes, go ahead. Kiswahili even better.
Okay. So hii kitu inaenda kwa mwendo wa risasi. So ni ngumu sana uweze kuiona inapozunguka duara la dunia. Na pia ili kwamba iweze kutekeleza wajibu wake, haiwezi ikasimama. Lazima iwe inazunguka toka wakati ambapo tutai-launch hadi wakati ambapo itafika what we call end of life. Wakati huo wote itakuwa ikizunguka. Ikifika nchini Kenya, yenyewe ndio itatuona, itupige picha, alafu itutumie hizo picha, tutumie hizo picha jinsi ambavyo Captain Claire amesema, amefafanua.
Will they get an opportunity to see the launch?
Yes.
They see something.
How is that?
So to see the launch, basically, like was mentioned, there is a ride-share mission. So the launch service provider, which is SpaceX, provides a live feed for us to be able to see the entire group of satellites going in the rocket into space. And if we are lucky enough, also we get to see the deployment, and we get to see Taifa 1 being deployed into its orbit.
All right, and you talked about the shelf life aspect, and it's more or less like a set standard. So after that, it disintegrates?
Yeah, so we look at what we call operational life of the satellite. The operational life basically is informed by our engineering input, and then the kind of orbit that we have inserted the satellite into. If we are using a low Earth orbit, we are able to get away with, we are able to have a bit of a longer lifespan because we have less effects such as radiation and less effects such as thermal conditions. So the kind of engineering we have put into Taifa 1 allows it to survive very well in the low Earth orbit. So what could hamper this mission is the energy. After 5 years, the quality of life on the batteries will have gone down too low to sustain the mission the way it could sustain at the launch. So at the end of 5 years, the operational life of the satellite is now considered done. So we can say thank you Taifa 1 for serving us, and by that time, hopefully, we already have successors who are already continuing the mission that Taifa 1 began. Then what happens is Taifa 1 remains in orbit for another 20 to 25 years. Over this period, the orbit altitude decays. So it may start at 500 kilometers, then after some time it drops to 480, after some time to 300, then to 200. And what happens is that the lower the orbit altitude, the higher the speed at which it has to go. The second thing is, the lower the orbit altitude, the more air particles it has to interact with. And now this results in a lot of friction that will end up burning up Taifa 1. The same way we do see shooting stars entering the atmosphere and then they burn up before they reach down. Taifa 1 will also be doing the same, orbiting at a higher velocity each time, and then it will burn up into the atmosphere. Yes.
Colonel, how high will it be, and is there anything like some sort of maintenance, or how do you ensure that it's I heard something about a health status.
Yes.
How do you follow up and track all that? All
right. Remember, this is 500 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, and then it's in an orbit. Every 90 minutes, it goes around completes one orbit. Then you'll be able, from your ground station, to get the telemetry from the. Basically, telemetry are messages coming from the satellite that has a package in them, the battery status, the condition of the solar panels, basically different voltage levels within the system that we're able to analyze and see that each subsystem is working properly. So with that, you actually know the health status of the satellite. Yes. Okay.
We just want to take a very short break, and I like how...
The feedback.
Oh, okay. So we'll take the feedback now and get to hear what...
Let's take a look at what Kenyans are saying. And in regards to the topic at hand, the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya. Bob Otieno Owino says, with Kenya joining the space race, it clearly says that we are heading into the right direction towards achieving Vision 2030. Kudos to the 9 engineers for lifting our flag high.
We have Godi Barasa-Were. Such brilliant minds like those 9 engineers should be the ones getting the budgetary boost and support to keep churning out great innovations for our country. Diversion of funds elsewhere is quite unhelpful.
Remy Butia says Kenya joining the space race is good news as it increases global cooperation and partnerships as envisioned in the SDG 17 and sparks youth interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses.
All right, we have Engineer Lazaro. Congratulations to our own young engineers for trying to put Kenya technological capabilities on the world map. Otherwise, tough questions. Will Wazungu give it a clean bill of health? Will government use it to spy on opposition. Engineer Lazaro.
Babu Michelle K says, about Taifa One launch, if you ask people randomly about it, larger percentage of people don't know anything about it, even in urban areas. This means that proper sensitization is needed if it comes to such matters.
We have Honorable Lilian Sioi. It's evident that under the administration of President William Ruto, as a country, we are venturing into spaces we would have only dreamt of. It's clear that Kenya Kwanza is supporting great innovations going forward.
All right, and those are some of your feedback. Of course, because of time, we can't sample the feedback that you have sent us, and as we wrap up, final comments, because this would have been a lovely discussion were we to continue. Starting with you, Charles, and Captain, coming to you, there seems to be concerns on spying aspects and the government using this for spying on opposition, a concern raised thereon. But what are your final feedback here going forward, and what do we expect on the 14th? And how will this play into the gallery of the technological advantage this will bring to the country?
On the issue of spying,
yes,
as my Mr. Charles mentioned, like the satellite will capture the images of the entire world. So it's not spying on the opposition. It's just spying on the activities which are happening on the earth and trying to bring the better benefit to the common mwananchi. For the technological advancement, Kenya, we are going there. As for the engineers, they are well trained, and now the part is even for the GS people and the data analysis, we are still moving forward. So as Kenya, we need to build more capacity for the young people in the campus and also at high school and also even at primary level, so that they come appreciating the use of space technologies and how we can best utilize the space data and the whole space ecosystem for the development of our country.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Charles?
Thank you. I would want to draw attention maybe to the question that was raised in terms of STEM and how we could move the conversation forward. And want to indicate I was part of the team that developed the first nanosatellite that went to space, which was a One-New, which was launched in 2018. And I'm happy that now Pattern have taken on the baton, and they're now launching a much bigger satellite with more functionality. And the challenge that I would want to pose, especially for the young people, is to believe that it is possible and to try and seek ways in which now we can advance and move this conversation forward, because we believe in Kenya we have the potential and we have to nurture it, and there is an economy out there that waits for us to nurture and to tap into it. So it's a challenge for all of us, also in the private sector, to try and see how they can support the activities that you're doing, as well also in terms of government by having much greater allocation so that we can move the conversation on space forward.
All right, Patton?
Yeah, thank you. Mine would be just to mention that all this is being done by Kenyan engineers, an amazing team of 9, including 3 capable and competent ladies. And this goes to the young Kenyans out there. Maybe you probably haven't been passionate because you didn't know where your talent or capabilities could go. But Taifa One testifies to the fact that Kenya now is in a position to receive your expertise. It doesn't take a genius to be able to do all of this, but it takes people with discipline and the right attitude. So mine is to welcome all of you. I know you are struggling in school or here and there with your readings. Just keep it up and know that the industry out here is ready to receive you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Colonel, your final thoughts?
Okay, as a country with the right investment, I think you're on the right trajectory to realize the benefits of space. Thank you.
All right, and Charles, there is, and just as a spillover of the question that was asked about Itasimama, which was so much about the concerns the public has, on sensitization, has it been properly done for the public to be in the know about what's happening, because this concerns them and they want to understand more about it? Have you done adequate sensitization on this entire project?
Yes and no. but partly because we wanted first to demonstrate the capability. And that is why we're coming now to the common mwananchi and telling them we have spent this money and this is what we are seeking to do, and these are the benefits. We want to thank the media for the support and even also giving us the opportunity to be in this show. We see we could do more. And one of the things that we're also trying at the agency to do is we have introduced what we're calling the space clubs, because we also want to see that information percolate to even students who are in schools. But again, in terms of the sensitization, we will seek to do more so that, again, we are able to demystify space and show what value it has for the common mwananchi, so that now the question stops being, why do we need to spend so much money in space, and yet we have a lot of issues on the ground, whereas space addresses most of the societal issues that has been mentioned. So we will seek other opportunities also to engage the public and inform them of the benefits and the potential of space. So I agree we need to do more, and we will seek to do that as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. An investment of, is it 50 million, this one?
Yes.
50 million
Kenya shillings, correct.
Not dollars.
But it's value for money based on what we've had the lady and gentleman talking about. We were having this sit down with Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Nyawade, Acting Director, Space Regulation, Exploration and Utilization. Thank you. We were also speaking to one of the engineers that have developed the Taifa 1. Patan Odhiambo is a space engineer. In studio with us this morning is also Captain Claire Muhungi, a GIS officer, and also Mr. Charles Mwangi, Acting Director, Space Sector and Technology Development. Thank you, all of you, for creating time and making this very basic for Kenyans to understand.
And a proud Kenyan moment, of course, for your involvement in the community of nations. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Up next is again Matters Engineering this time round. Safin will come back with a discussion on the safety standards of our buildings, and she will be talking to Shama Kiteme, who is from the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. Concerns have been raised about the standards of buildings, especially in the counties of Nairobi and Kiambu. He will be shedding more light on what needs to be done in terms of the course correction point. Many thanks for your time, and that will be up and on after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.